This is something my great-grandpa told me about during his time in service during World War II. Great-grandpa, native Swede, was serving with the Finns during World War II, right on the border to Russia. Often gets set out on scouting missions and such. Once, during such a mission, he and his quote-unquote squad get into a firefight with what they assumed was Russian scouts. Firefight goes on for a while, until they get hit by a freak snowstorm. Deepest winter on the Russo-Finn border is much or less Ragnarok on its own. Add a snowstorm to that, and yeah, you get the picture. Great-grandpa and his men take this opportunity to bail, and do so successfully, but end up getting lost in the process. According to him, it felt like they were walking for hours, until they finally saw faint lights in the dark and raging weather. Their relief wasn't long-lived, though, when the figure that approached them from the light aimed his rifle at them and ordered them, in what great-grandpa always described as exceptionally slurred Russian, to drop their weapons and surrender. Great-grandpa and his squad did so, considering they were tired and almost out of ammo anyway. Another Russian takes their shit, and 2 more fellas lead them at gunpoint through their camp. Camp consisted of about 24 snow-covered tents, some haphazardly made palisade, and a couple of fading campfires. There were people huddled closely all around the fires, all draped in thick gray wool coats and blankets, and the few that weren't by a fire were standing in the dark edges of camp, keeping watch. Finally, they reached a bigger fire in camp and are told to sit and shut up, while one of the guards put handcuffs and manacles on them and lock them. After this is done, the Russian who captured them looks at my great-grandpa and points to a man sitting opposite of him and says, "This is Strynek. Strynek never sleeps, and he never blinks, so don't do anything stupid." Sure enough, underneath the thick blanket, coat, and slightly obscured by the rim of his helmet, great-grandpa could make out the fire reflecting off of the man's eyes. While the storm raged on in the background, great-grandpa silently tried to stay awake, but after the day he'd had, he couldn't, and finally fell asleep. That morning, he's awakened by one of his squad mates, frantically wrestling his chains, trying to get them off. He shoots a glance at Strynek, who's still staring coldly at him. Squad mate, who's still trying to get the chains off, suddenly shouts, "Never mind them, they're all dead! Just help me!" After they get the chains off, they investigate, and sure enough, every single Russian in that camp was dead, including 2 of great-grandpa's men who froze to death during the night. They, and the 4 guards that arrested them, were the only ones even remotely fresh. The rest were ice pops, as great-grandpa put it. After that, it's nothing interesting. They managed to get back to their post and report their night. Apparently, they had managed to wander off into Russian territory during the snowstorm. My great-grandpa was a rock of a man. Nothing fazed him except snow and the crackling of fire after that. When he would come over and visit, we would have to put out our fireplace. Otherwise, he wouldn't come inside, and whenever it started snowing, he would pull the blinds down and cry quietly. This is something I've only posted once before. Driving during work, pouring rain, driving alongside river. Come to barren stretch where there's no sidewalk. Dangerous on a normal day. Just fence on one side protecting you from the river, and a cliff on the other. Fucking insane woman walking along road on cliffside, up ahead, where there's very rough, rocky terrain. White party dress, pale and blonde, no raincoat. Doesn't seem cold, even though it's maybe 60 degrees Fahrenheit. I guess she's walking home to her house, around the bend, way up the road. She's navigating quite effortlessly, despite swampy rocks and boulders at 30-degree angle, in driving rain. Feel bad she's out in the storm, kind of want to offer her a ride. Start to approach and pass her. She's not more than 10 feet from my car. See she's not wet, despite the heavy downpour, and having walked at least half a mile from the nearest building. What the fuck? She turns towards the road as I'm passing her. Oh fuck no, I'm not getting charged for manslaughter today. Honk. She halts and looks up. I'm already going around the bend. Watch rearview mirror. I have to see where this character is headed. She never comes out from behind the cliff, despite it being a 90-degree river bend, with nowhere else to walk, besides follow the road and river. There's no way she scaled the muddy rock wall up the fucking cemetery. How the fuck was she so dry in all of this rain? Months later, another heavy downpour day, driving that same strip. Even darker, worse visibility. See car taillights pulled over ahead. No blinkers. Blocking lane because no shoulder due to same rock slope. Slow down as I approach. Don't want to kill anyone. See a woman leaning by passenger window to talk to driver. What the fuck? Is this psycho really dropping someone off right here, where the river could flood and sweep them away? Give short honk, like an asshole because, angry, I have to go to oncoming traffic lane on blind turn. Girl straightens up to look over at me, over car hood. Notice she has the same hair, and is wearing white too. No way she's wearing that same dress. Look in mirror to get a longer look. She's not there, but the car still is. How did she get in the car that fast? The door already shut. She still looked dry. What the fuck? Found out a couple years later, she's a well-known local ghost who was run over on that strip several decades ago. Up on the rocky cliff is a huge cemetery where she's buried. Felt really bad when I realized I interrupted her conversation with someone who was nice enough to stop and chat when he saw her. Haven't driven that way in the rain in a couple years now. A few years ago, I used to work at a small library in a much larger mall in Pittsburgh. The store itself got shut down around New Year's 2022, and I put library in air quotes. It was really more of a combination movie, music, and bookstore, but the books were what we sold the most of. I worked the register most of the time. Only other employees were a guy named Josh, who stocked the shelves, and this gruff-looking woman covered in tattoos named Meredith, who was the manager. It was in winter, probably February of 2019, that my first big spook at this store happened. Unremarkable-looking dude came up to the counter with a CD jewel case. It was missing its cover, or even the tabs on the side, where the name usually is. But the disc itself had $3.99 scribbled on it, in Sharpie. The guy was more confused than interested in buying it, and just asked me what it was. I told him I knew about as much as he did, but I could take a look in the spreadsheet, where we keep our stock, organized by price and volume. Took the CD in the back of the store, and spent about a minute or two scrolling up and down the dock with no dice. Shit, there wasn't anything we sold that was around that price range. Everything was at least $5 and above. In a last-ditch effort, I figured I'd pop it into a CD tray and see what it was. VLC media player popped it up, and the disc started playing. Just footage from a bunch of CCTV cameras. First was outside some suburban house at night. Then, it was an alley in some urban neighborhood, where a family of raccoons were digging through a dumpster. Then, it was the outside of the store. And then, the same room I was sitting in. Of course, I wasn't on camera, but each clip had a date in the upper right. The one from the store's back room was just from yesterday. I never remembered seeing a camera back there, so I spun around in the office chair and, sure enough, nothing's there. This is probably my most tame story, but it lingers in my mind more than other events. On break from my current job, so I'll share another short story from the bookstore. This one was just a few weeks after I started working there, in late 2018. Can't remember the exact date, but I know it was either in October or November. In the store by the big shelf of music CDs, there's a little stereo system with a shitty pair of headphones. The idea is you could come in and, if you were interested in a CD, you could listen to it for a bit, before deciding whether or not you wanted it. Most of the music on sale was shitty country music, but Josh was fucking around with it because the store had just opened for the day, and there wasn't really anything to be done. All of a sudden, I started getting this ringing in my ears, and one hell of a headache in my sinuses. I sighed, expecting another migraine because I usually get them as the months get colder, for whatever reason. But the pain ceased really quickly, and my face started feeling numb, until I felt something warm dribble down my lips. I reached up and touched my nose, and it was fucking gushing blood. I was more pissed than anything because the store didn't have a bathroom. I didn't have a change of clothes, and the white cotton button-up I wore to work, I had just purchased a day ago. Josh didn't notice anything, and I waved for his attention. Shouted for him, but I couldn't even hear my own voice. Not even like when you plug your ears and talk. All I could hear was ringing. Instinct told me to pinch my nose and blow to pop my ears, and that worked like a charm. I shouted again and could actually hear myself now, as could Josh. He helped me get all cleaned up with a wet towel, and Meredith let me borrow one of the night agent graphic band tees they kept in the back and gave me the day off. I talked with her that evening over the phone about what had happened, and apparently it had happened before to the old cashier, but she had no clue why. These next two stories are about a crazy dude back in my hometown named Roy. First, a little background on how Roy went kinda nuts. Then, I'll tell you about a supposedly haunted murder weapon, followed by the time I saw a weird quote-unquote creature on Roy's property. Back in my hometown, we've got this guy named Lane. Dude is a menace. He's kind of like a local celebrity, but for all of the wrong reasons. We also have these two brothers who are very well liked, Roy and Roy's brother. One day, Psycho Lane invites Roy's brother on a hunting trip. Roy's brother is an easygoing guy, knows Lane isn't exactly friendly, but decides to take him up on the offer. The two boys go up into the mountains, and only one comes back. The death of Roy's brother is ruled as a hunting accident, and there's not enough evidence to say it wasn't. But knowing Lane, everyone is suspicious. He becomes a true outcast and spends the rest of his days living alone on the outskirts of town. He does manage to sell one of his guns though, and it changes hands a few times. This gun is the rifle that he supposedly used to murder Roy's brother, and for this reason, it's supposed to be haunted. For anyone that cares, the rifle was a Winchester, or to be exact, it was a Winchester Model 1892 in .45 long, with an octagonal barrel, 20 inches or maybe the next size up, I can't remember. Plain blued finish, minimal checkering on handguard and butt, Lyman peep sight added to the receiver. The gun could have been a museum piece, it was beautiful. Anyway, one of my buddies ends up with the rifle. He's kind of an out-of-towner, picked it up by chance, doesn't know the gun's history at all. He keeps it locked up in a safe. When he first shows it to me, he tells me he thinks that the thing is bad luck. Claims he's had a series of weird experiences ever since he bought it. Unusual, quote-unquote, accidents. Some of these accidents have been serious, like the time a severe windstorm caused major damage to his property. Misfortune after misfortune. I only ever experienced something minor with this gun. It was the first time that my buddy showed it to me. He let me hold it. The TV was on in the background, and the moment I took the gun in my hands, the TV suddenly went to static. My buddy and I looked at the TV. There was a long moment of static. I handed the gun back, and the TV went back to normal. Like I said, kind of a minor thing, but what I didn't tell my buddy at the time was how I got a really sick feeling when I held this murder weapon. For reference, I have tons of war trophies in my collection, all with grisly histories. Even fired an Oriska Type 99 once, but I have never gotten a feeling like I got when I held that Winchester. Impossible to describe except to say it gave me an ominous feeling, like a darkness hung over me while I held it. After that, I can't help but wonder what exactly went down in those woods with Lane and Roy's brother. As much as I love classic rifles, I'm glad that one is back in my hometown, 1,400 miles away from where I currently live. I forgot to mention that Roy himself deteriorated mentally after his brother's death. I'm not 100% sure if it's related, but Roy was later diagnosed with schizophrenia. It was pretty sad. Every few months, he would go off of his meds and do crazy shit. For example, I found him once attacking an asphalt road with a pickaxe. He was screaming about zippers. Apparently, he believed there were underground tunnels all throughout town, which led directly to his shitty little shack. Thieves, or zippers, would use these tunnels to sneak into his place and steal his stuff, and then disappear before he noticed. He also claimed at times to be a reincarnated soldier from the Union, named Robert G. Stebbin. Stebben. So yeah, it was bad. Roy went from being the most well-liked guy in town to being banned from, virtually, every public space. He and that little evil fucker Lane became our town's outcasts. Anyway, my family and Roy's family had always been really close. After Roy went full schizo, my parents had me check up on him from time to time. I would deliver fresh water to his shack and just see how he was doing. I didn't mind. Even when he was off of his meds, Roy was always friendly with me. Said that I had a good aura. He still did weird shit though. Like, once, he offered to show me the room where he said he spoke with Satan on a nightly basis. I politely declined. But back to my sighting. I'm delivering water, as usual. On this particular trip, I have one of my friends with me. We find that Roy has ripped up all of the floorboards to his shack in order to expose this underground tunnels that were used by the zippers. He's tossed the wood into a heap and set it ablaze in a bonfire. Being off of his meds made Roy a serious talker, so my friend drops off the jugs and settles in for an extended stay. It's getting towards late evening. Roy is rambling about something or other. The woods around us are going dark. In the last light of day, I spot something in the trees behind Roy. Here's the basic description of what I saw. Humanoid, skinny, tall fucker. Maybe 1.5 times as tall as an average man. Looked to be covered in shaggy black hair. It's standing there for a moment before it turns and bounds away into the brush. Bipedal. Looks back over its shoulder as it goes. Move through those thick woods and brush much faster than a person could have. After it disappears, I'm still staring into the trees when my buddy tugs at my sleeve and says, "Did you see that too?" That moment gave me goosebumps. I don't know what I saw, but whatever it was, I didn't imagine it. My buddy saw it too. Believe me, the two of us had a long and silent and very intense car ride home that night. We didn't even talk about what we'd seen until we were back and feeling safe inside the house. After discussing it, I gathered that my friend really only saw the thing after it had moved. I got the better look at it. We discussed what it logically could have been, decided it didn't fit any logical explanation that we could think of, decided to just drop it. These days, that patch of woods is abandoned. Roy's hut was demolished a while back. The road leading to it is blocked by fallen trees and old abandoned cars. Looks to me like the road was deliberately impeded by junk, maybe to keep people away. Who knows? I never saw the thing again, though, whatever it was. Okay, I know this story's familiar because he left out a detail that I remember from last time where I think his friend didn't know how bad Roy would get when he was off of his meds. So he purposely made his friend, talk to Roy for a long time just to get him, all riled up or something. I don't know. I remember that. It's a good story, though. I can post OC. I'm a police officer in a small nowhere town. Over the last couple months, I have begun to encounter what I can only describe as Ghanese witchcraft. The story involves two neighbors having a dispute. Weird shit went on. Let me go get a beer and I'll post what I know. First off, I got called to a house for a neighborly dispute. As a cop, you always roll your eyes at that shit because it's usually petty shit like property line arguments or your trash can is pushed on my side of the gutter. Before I arrive, I look up the call history and sure enough, that looks like exactly what this was going to be. These neighbors had called the police on each other one time each, and it looked like now it was all-out petty wars. So now we get to where I come in. Finish viewing call history, arrive to property, knock on caller's door. An overweight white lady greets me and lets me inside. Immediately noticed a mixed kid playing, which is sent upstairs while mom deals with me. She gives me the QRD. Basically, her neighbors are loud and blasting music and being loud at night, and keeping her child awake. Get some background. Mom doesn't work, and her child is 6. The father is a black dude from Ghana that works construction. They're crazy. Every time I step outside, I see her, the neighbors, blinds flip up, and she just stares at me. If I wave or something, she just stares. I go over to talk to the neighbor. Sure as shit, her blinds are all fucked up. It looks like she's swatting them around because they're all beat up and crumpled. A black woman with a heavy African accent greets me, and to my surprise, given the window blind situation, when I enter her home, it is fucking immaculate. I am even more impressed when I see she has 4 young children to boot. All look well cared for and groomed, and the father, also black African, is home and greets me. Find out they're all from Ghana. They complain about the white lady next door, and also the husband. He's violent. Violent? What do you mean? The black woman takes her phone out and shows me that she has a Ring doorbell camera. She scrolls for a minute and finds a video for me. In it, I hear what sounds like a deranged African man ranting. Most of it I cannot make out because of a combination of the thick accent as well as the camera not being of great quality. But occasionally, I can make out fragments. In particular, I hear him say, "Your children will have to be raised by someone else. I don't give a fuck. I'm not scared of going away. I will protect my family. Black African lady tells me it is her white neighbor's husband, but I cannot be sure because he is not in the camera's frame during the tirade. I go back to white lady's door to ask about all that crazy shit I just heard. She admits it was her husband, but it was brought on by the neighbors disturbing their child at night. So they play loud music all night. No, they bang on the wall. One of them on the first story, the other on the second story. And they yell at us, but I don't know what they're saying. My husband does. He speaks the language. Can I talk to him? Down comes a black dude so skinny he would blow away if the wind were any heavier than a light breeze. He says to me with a face completely straight that they are cursing his family. Like they're yelling profanity at you? No, they are cursing us. They are wanting my child to have poor health. You see, because I am a black man and my wife is white, they don't like it. The woman especially does not like my wife. I see. I entertained them, but at this point, I checked out and warned the guy that he can't run around yelling like a madman like in the video that I heard, and to just avoid the neighbors. If any trouble happens, call me back. Don't try and handle anything alone. A little while goes by without me going back to this residence. Don't know exactly how long, but no more than a couple weeks. When I get another dispatch to head over there, I check the notes. Even though I wasn't going over there, other cops were. There were multiple calls by both neighbors on each other for various things. No arrests made, just vague threats, as is typical for neighborly disputes like this. Arrive. This time, the African couple called me on the white lady. The African woman shows me a picture of her walking. See? See? What? The man next door married to the white woman. He followed me to the park and took a photo of me. He texted this to me. I never even saw him. He's threatening me. I see the picture. It certainly looks like how she described it. She's freaking out, and I don't exactly blame her. She says something like, "This is a threat where I come from. This photo would be used to hire an assassin. Tell her nobody's getting assassinated and to chill the fuck out." Go next door. White lady and her husband have a completely different story. They claim they went to the park, and the African woman followed them. They took that picture of her for evidence, and sent her a text telling her that they were notifying the police. I called dispatch, and sure as shit, they did drop by to issue a report with that photo, claiming they were being stalked. Now it's he said, she said, as is always the case with neighborhood bullshit calls. I go to both homes to tell them both to stay the fuck away from one another. The white woman nearly breaks into tears and says, "I wish we had the money to break our lease and get out of here." More time goes by. Get called back. Check notes. They haven't changed, meaning no police have been called by either party since I was there last, and told everyone to leave each other alone. White lady was the caller. She invites me in. Her kid is home when she should be in school. White lady tells me her child can't sleep and hasn't slept in a couple days because of the banging on the walls. So she didn't send her kid to school. Her kid's hair is all fucking crazy, and while I'm talking to the mom, she asks me shit like, "Are you here to make the weird lady stop? Why don't you guys ever call the police when they're doing the banging?" "We do. Once you guys show up, they just stop until you leave." Go next door. African lady is home. Her husband is asleep. Tells me her husband works late nights to early mornings. That banging the neighbors hear is him cooking late at night. I go back to white lady and tell her to record the commotion the next time it happens. Her Ghanese husband comes downstairs and begs me to do something. He hasn't been able to work and provide for his family because he's afraid to leave them alone. I don't know what the fuck is going on, and I can't do anything legally. I advise them to avoid their neighbors, record the banging, and if possible, just fucking scrounge up the money to move. The white lady is crying now and tells me that they can't move. Well, I can't do anything. Until you give me something, I can't do anything. Some more time goes by before I am sent to that place again. At this point, I am done with the entire fucking ordeal and just want to get the sheriff and housing authority to evict someone and be done with it. To my surprise, this call is not a dispute, but a welfare check, and was fucking called by the black Ghanese couple for the white lady and her Ghanese husband. Check notes. A fucking explosion of calls, all done by the white lady. Could feel the tone of the other officers in the notes that they too were just done with the entire situation. Surprised to see that the white lady's Ghanese husband was threatened with hospitalization due to a vague suicide threat on the last call. No idea what it was about because that's all it said. I arrive and put on my best, "I really care about this, really," face. White lady greets me. Her house is in complete disarray. Notice daughter isn't around. So she's in school? She's getting sleep again. No. She's staying with my mother. She couldn't sleep here. The banging kept her awake and she was having bad dreams. Your neighbors said that they were worried about you. They heard shouting. Some kind of argument? White lady looks completely done and doesn't react at all. I want to leave. My husband doesn't want to. Do you have the money to leave? No, but we don't have a choice. We can't stay here. You won't do anything. Why won't he leave? Gani's husband walks in. Because leaving won't fix anything. They have cursed us. I tell them I'm going to call a supervisor out and see if he could convince the HA to forgive their leasing agreement just so they can get out. At this point, their neighbors would probably just appreciate it. Gani's husband just bows his head and says, Sure. As I leave and make for the HA, I see the blinds flip violently. Gani's woman is there, just staring. She smiles at me. Around 9, in year 5, that's 4th grade, I think, for the Americans, one day, the teacher from class next door has money stolen from her purse during break. When we come back in, everyone is in the yard at break. We get forced to stand by our chairs and empty our pockets onto the table, one by one. At that age, you don't really have anything in your pockets because stationery and things are supplied by the school. Insist my pockets are empty. Get told to turn them out anyway. Reluctantly put hands in trouser pockets. Feel something. Must have guilty look on my face because the teacher grabs my arm and yanks my hand out. Open hand. It's a fucking human tooth. Not a child's one. A proper adult molar. Have absolutely no explanation for where it came from. I'd forgotten all about it, but one of the kids from the class I'm still friends with brought it up to see if I could remember. Like I could forget something like that. Wait, you just said you'd forgotten all about it. Like I could forget something that bizarre. You just said I'd forgotten all about it. Alright. Some rough as fuck kid from a broken home had stolen the money, by the way. Never seen him in school after that. Not really green text worthy, but it was still weird. Be me. Working at Pea Island Asylum, New South Wales, Australia, in the 90s. Asylum was built in pretty rural country. Only access was via ferry, or the single road leading to and from the island. Creepy, but fascinating place to work. Get to know a patient called Carlos, a man of Spanish heritage. Naturally, very Catholic. One of his delusions included thinking I was a Catholic saint. Wandered after me wherever he could, praying at me. Over the past week, he had been getting more and more frantic and unpredictable. Told me he was being tormented by a man in black, or a black man or a shadow man. The exact nature of the delusion changed every day, but the general idea remained the same. Think nothing of it, just a crazy being crazy. One night, 2 a.m. or so, doing my rounds, open door to the next wing, stopped dead in my tracks. Man dressed in all black, with a ski mask, standing at the other end of the hallway. Sprints at me, and I shit bricks. Run back the way I came and slam the door behind me. Run all the way to the break room, until the only other guy on shift that someone is in the building. Grabs his pistol. This was back before Australia was cucked. And searched the whole building. Was long gone by the time we finished our search. And searched the whole building. Was long gone by the time we finished our search. Never found out who it was. Delusions involving dark figures are certainly not uncommon, but a small part of me can't help but think Carlos was being sent some kind of message or something, or a warning. That was the scariest thing to happen while I was there. Was otherwise a nice place to work. Shame that they demolished it in 2010. Posting some OC that happened to me about 9 years ago. Be in the Air Force. Stationed in Montana. Guarding nukes. They're in the middle of nowhere, usually. It's boring as fuck, nothing ever happens. Finish about 11 hours of babysitting a site. Our relief shows up. Secure our Humvees and me and my bro head out. Make it about 10 minutes when we get a call that something tripped a vacant site's IMPSS alarm. It's on the way back to base, so we're told to check it out real quick. 100% of the time it is a fucking rabbit or a ground squirrel that makes it inside the fence and sets the thing off. Get to site. It's October, and there is snow on the ground, but it isn't snowing. The wind is blowing the snow that is on the ground everywhere. Feels like fucking needles. And I had already pulled my face mask off since I thought we were going home, but I decided to just deal with it. This should only take a minute. Bro tells me to check it out alone. Not supposed to ever do security checks alone, but literally everyone does, and you just take turns. Stomping around through snow. Can't see shit, and freezing my balls off. Can't see anything, but I walk the entire perimeter. Walk back to Humvee and send out all clear over radio. We drive about a minute down the road, when we are told to turn around, because the fucking alarm is tripped again. Go back to site. This time we actually have to go on site, and verify that there's nothing inside. Then we can go. It is Bro's turn to freeze his ass off. I can sit in the nice warm Humvee. Bro pulls right up to the fence. I am in the passenger seat. Bro gets out, unlocks gate, disappears into the darkness and snow. Hear someone moving in the deep snow. There are farms and shit all over these nuke sites, so it could be a farmer, but I doubt it. Don't have night vision or anything cool, just a good old flashlight. Shine it around, see nothing. Nearly have a heart attack as Bro flips on site's floodlights to check the perimeter. These massive lights give just enough vision for me to see a huge black ball standing in the corner of my eye. Turn to face it, and it takes off. It runs on all fours. Can only make out antlers or horns. Looks like a big-ass goat, but I swear, it stood on 2 legs before it realized that I saw it. Bro calls me on radio to check this out. Go to him. Massive hoof marks in the snow. Mostly covered from the blowing wind, so they had to be fresh. Tell him about what I saw. Says it must be a big-ass billy goat. This thing was bear-sized, so there's no fucking way. Anyone got any ideas for what it was? I didn't smell any coppery bullshit, so it wasn't a skinwalker. I have 2 short ones to tell, but I suck at green texting, and I'm English, second language, so sorry in advance. The first one might not even be paranormal, but it's one of the strangest shit I've ever experienced. Be me, 9 to 10 years old in Europe, playing outside with my best friend, with tree branches and a frisbee, because it was a sunny day. This was in our residence block, so we weren't even in a wood, but the entire area had a lot of bushes and hazelnut trees. Suddenly, we see a shadow being casted on us, and a flapping sound. We look up and see the weirdest fucking sight. It was a huge red-colored bird, flying very close above us. It looked similar to a poultry mixed with a falcon. In its fangs, it looked like it had at least 3 or 4 snakes, and it dropped one of them next to us as we were looking at it. It wasn't an actual snake, but just a slow worm. However, me and my friend weren't even shocked by the snake thing, because the fucking flying bird had no head. This thing was flying without a head, but with a bunch of snakes in its claws. After looking at the slow worm, it seemingly dropped, and at each other's, we decided to run towards where the weird bird thing flew too, especially since it flew so low. It was possible that it landed somewhere, especially since, it should be, at the very least, dying, because it doesn't have a head. It was nowhere to be seen. To this day, I have no fucking idea what the hell that was, or if it even was paranormal. My second story comes from a friend, and is 100% paranormal though. My friend and his family live in rural Europe. They bought this old rural house years ago before I knew him. They started renovating it as soon as they bought it, and as they did, they broke a wall in order to get more space. Inside the wall was a hidden room, with a shit ton of World War II Nazi paintings, medals, and items. They were weirded out by it, but ended up giving it to a war museum. After that, though, at night, they were hearing child cries and footstep noises in the wooden staircases, as well as banging noises inside the walls. Being Christian, they decided to call a priest and purify the house. The noises stopped ever since. They then learned kids and civilians were killed by Nazis in this area during World War II, and that the house was likely to have been a place where they were killed.